Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to Cheryl's Coffee. I hope you're having a wonderful, wonderful day. It is October. It is finally one of the cool days in October when here in Texas we have a little cool front. It was 40 in the 40s this morning. So a little too cold for me. I was freezing at my son's baseball game last night, but I know most people love the cold fall weather. So I hope you grab a nice cup of warm coffee this morning because we're going to be talking about monsters. Now it's Halloween time, and you guys know I absolutely love Halloween, but today we're going to talk about not Halloween monsters. We're going to talk about the Menendez brothers. And if you have not seen the newest Netflix docudrama, I guess you should say it's more of a drama than a docu, but you should go watch it. I recently watched it and I have been intrigued, saddened, shocked, and anxious. All the feelings for these two people and all of those whose lives have been disrupted because of this tangle of monsters. If you have not gotten your coffee, go grab you some. I've got my Halloween cup this morning and warmed it up twice because I was doing the mom things this morning, getting the kids ready, and my coffee would get cold, but I just warmed it up, added some milk, and I'm ready to jump in and talk about these monsters. Now, I was young when the incident happened. If you may have to go back in your memory to remember this. Late 80s. Late 80s. Okay, so I would have been 11 when this first happened. If you are just jumping in and you are someone who was born after the 80s and 90s, you may not really know this story, but it was hot headlines in the late 80s, early 90s, and then it's popped in and out on different shows and, Datelines and 48 Hours and those kinds of murder podcast, which I love, Murdercast. But I really had written these two guys off as psychopathic killers. I really, when I started watching the new series, I think there's 9 of them, 8 or 9 of them. I had no idea what I was getting into. So if you're like me and you were just a child and your parents didn't let you watch it, or maybe you saw it for a second, you're going to want to hear this because this is, I was shocked. And so I'm going to take you back to 1989. I do remember seeing the news reports of 2 brothers who were from an extremely rich family, not like me, who blew their parents' heads off, literally. And remember being shocked when I saw it. I would listen, my dad would always watch the news when mom was cooking the dinner. And I was like, what? People killed their parents? The term is parricide. Didn't even know there was such a word. And people who study serial killers, murderers, and just people who have acts of crimes of passion study these kinds of people. I've learned this from my murder cast. And try to figure out what causes this. It's the whole chicken or the egg. Are there innate things in your body? Is it chemical? Is it in your DNA? Are you predisposed to killing? Or does something outside of your locus of control cause these people to turn into monsters? So 1989, these 2 extremely rich, spoiled boys, they were almost men, decide to murder their parents. So at the time in 89, Eric Menendez was 18 and he was preparing to go to college. And Lyle was 21 and he had been in and out of college for some issues, I believe, at Princeton. His parents had gotten into obviously Princeton. That's, an Ivy League, fancy. And he was not doing well. If you watch the series, it takes you back into these boys' lives. First of all, with what people were seeing on the outside, that they were spoiled rich kids. They were extremely spoiled. There's one scene where the dad goes to buy one of the kids a car, and he brings them to the dealership, and he shows them the car, and it's a car that any of our boys, children, daughters, young adults would absolutely love. But he was like, this is a piece of blah, blah, blah. This is a crappy car. It was a red convertible, blah, blah, blah. It was this fancy, fancy car, but it wasn't the one he wanted. And he has just a little temper tantrum there as I don't know how late teen, I don't know when it supposedly happened in 18, 18, 19 years old, temper tantrum at the place, and he doesn't get a car he wants. And he just has to take home this, crappy, probably back then was like a $50,000 car, which would be like $200,000 car today. And there's many incidences like that at the country clubs. The oldest boy, Lyle, played tennis and was trying to become a tennis pro. And he would kind of do that, throw the tennis racket and be mad. Little temper tantrums like spoiled little rich brats do. And so from the outside looking in, the dad was an immigrant from a South American country. I don't remember which one. I don't even know if it's said. Mom was American. They meet when they're young, like 16-ish, and the dad came here, Jose, with nothing, and worked in soup kitchens and dishwashers and did all the things, and works his way up to be an exec with RCA and in the music industry. And he is actually one of the people that worked with Menudo. So way back, pull that back. Woo, who is Menudo? So Menudo was one of those boy bands, but it had a different kind of a different thing. It wasn't just the same 4 or 5 kids. Once they aged out, then it would be new kids. And so it was kind of like almost like Mickey Mouse Club, right? So they'd come in for a couple years and then they would go do something else or whatever. The most famous person in Menudo was Ricky Martin. Many people don't know that he was originally, that was his thing. That's how he became famous, was from Menudo. He was the most famous Menudo boy, is all boys. And they were all, obviously Menudo is going to be Hispanic and gorgeous little boy band, whatever. And I don't know how many went through, probably 10 or 12, because I was young back then. I remember like it would change, which is kind of interesting. But anyway, it was boy band Menudo and made billions back in the 80s, y'all, billions. And so they were banking, this family. And on the news one night, it shows the boys, Eric and Lyle, go and buy shotguns and literally blow their parents to smithereens. They first say that there was that they come home from the movies or something and their parents are dead, and they call the police and whatever. And it goes for a while, they're looking for somebody. They say the mob did it. Somebody did it for money. Maybe the dad owed money or whatever. But of course, police are smart, and they quickly find that it was the boys that did it. Right. And so they arrest them. The first time that they go to trial is 4 years later in 1993, and it is a hung jury mistrial. So you guys know what that means. It's like 50-50. There wasn't a majority. They could not get to everybody agreeing, and it's a mistrial, which is so horrible when that happens. And they get retried. They try again. And in 1995, they're convicted. They don't get the death penalty, but they do get life sentences, both of them. And that's really all that I didn't know all the back. I just knew they got convicted, life sentences, these murderers, horrible, horrible people. And what I'm thinking in my mind, and whatever, write them off that they were spoiled little rich kids and they were stupid. And everybody thinks that they did it for the money. They, I guess, had been overheard complaining to their friends. Their parents wouldn't give them any money, didn't give them the car they wanted. Of course, kids spin it, oh, my parents making me come home from college, whatever. But back in the 90s, people did not talk about something very much, and that was sexual abuse, and especially sexual abuse and rape of boys and men, because at this point, they're men, 18, 19 years old, 21. And so the, mid episodes of the series go into these abuse allegations that the boys end up telling their lawyer and their psychologist, therapist, or whatever, as they're going through the preparations for their trials. And hold on to your bootstraps because it's rough. It's real rough. And that's why it hits me, is because, you guys know I'm an educator. I love kids. And when kids get hurt, like I can't even watch a scary movie that has a kid in it that it gets hurt, or if the kid becomes the monster in the movie, I literally, I can't. I just have to turn it off. The Ring, nope, can't do it. And the series really does a good job of laying out the layers of abuse: the physical, the sexual, the mental, like truly psychological abuse that these boys said that their parents did to them. If 1/10 of what these kids said happened to them is true, I think they should get off. I think they should be released. And that's kind of why it popped up into the news now. Actually, yesterday I watched the new news conference with family members. These are family members of these boys saying they should be released. And that, I think, is telling. It's now, so let's see, they did not get released from prison in between the mistrial and the conviction, which my husband, who is in law enforcement, said that's strange. I did not know that. Did not know that. But he said that typically when that happens, they'll be released on bond, obviously, and they'll come back for their second trial. But they didn't. They were in jail and prison since they got arrested. Things were different back in the day. And so it's 1995, they get the conviction. It's now 2024. It's a long time. So they never said that they did. And once they got arrested, they said, yeah, it was us. There's just too much evidence. So they admitted that they did it, but said that they did it to get out of this abuse. And a lot of people said, you're 18, 19 years old, leave. Well, a lot of strings attached to money, lots of psychological abuse, and really almost Munchausen syndrome, especially with the younger boy. He tells a few stories in the movie, which a lot of it is adapted from what happened, but that he had tried as a kid. He would run away to his aunt's house that was like a couple blocks away, and they would, of course, like a good aunt would, well, buddy, mom and dad just have to discipline you sometimes and take him back home. And he talked about it being like the arms of an octopus. Like he would try to get away and get sucked back in, try to get away, sucked back in. He was wanting to go to college, and the dad said he wasn't as smart as his older brother. The dad would always use the two against each other, even in some sickening ways. And said, you're not as smart as your brother. You don't have, any sports skills like he does. And so you're going to go to a local college. And really so that the dad could keep him home and continue abusing him. They report that the dad was still sexually abusing Eric, the 18-year-old, right up until they were murdered. The parents were murdered. It is sickening and so sad. Now, flip side, what if these guys are just bullshitting everybody and it didn't even happen? What if they really were just crazy? What if they really were predisposed to killing? What if they wanted the money? Supposedly, the boys had been written out of the will a couple of weeks before. So honestly, they weren't getting very much money when the parents passed away. So I don't know. I'd love to hear your thoughts about it, but the abuse that is reported is so deep on so many layers of sexual abuse, painful sexual abuse, and pitting the boys against each other, even sexually, where the dad tells the one that he enjoys being with the one brother more than him. When kids are sexually abused, and a lot of times predators will say this, well, then they started coming to me, so they must like it. And what we don't realize is that, and they talk about this in here, that this was the only time their dad ever gave them attention. And so it screws with your mind that I will get some attention, but I have to deal with this first. There's what do you call it? Experiment that was done with monkeys. And they were put in a cage with a bristle brush, like a bristle brush, kind of like that you would use to clean like a grill or something out concrete, right? Bristles, hard. And that if the baby monkeys, these are babies, would rub up against this bristle brush for a certain amount of time, they would get food and affection from the trainer. And it's the Pavlov's dog, right? But it's the negative effects of Pavlov's dog. So the kid would do the kid or the animal, the monkey, would rub himself up against this bristle brush so bad that he would be bleeding just to get to that good thing of the blanket and the warmth and the attention and the food from the trainer. And this is what happens to kids that are in abuse, even adults that are in abusive relationships. We see this with domestic abuse, right? We stay in because we're hoping that something's going to get better once it's over, we get the flowers or whatever, the love bombing after that. And it's this vicious cycle. And when kids are brought up in this, they really don't know what the real reality is. The one boy talks about his sexuality and how he started thinking that he was homosexual because he began to like it in some ways, right? Because when you touch certain parts of your body, it's going to feel good. Or you're just going to have a natural physiological reaction that you can't control. And he began to think, maybe I'm gay. And in the late 80s, that was like a big no-no, and certainly in some social circles. And he said, I don't know what I am. This poor child is so confused. The difference between a lie and the truth becomes so blurred because they had been manipulated and lied to so many times. They really didn't know, and they thought that was normal. There's reports that they said to their cousins, does your dad do this stuff to you? And the cousins were like, no, but they didn't tell. Back then, people didn't tell. Today, there's still people who don't tell. It's like the hush hush thing, right? It's really not that bad. It's really not that bad. They're over exaggerating. There's reports that, so people say, why'd they kill the mom? Well, how many of y'all really think that two people living in a house aren't going to know what's going on? The amount of abuse that they're alleging, there's no way a spouse wouldn't know. And some of this wasn't even just sexual. It was verbally abusive, screaming at the boys, calling them all kinds of names in front of people. Even coaches and different things would say that the dad was just absolutely horrible. And nowadays we call that abuse. And if you're going to abuse somebody in front of 100 people at a tennis match, guess what you're going to do when they're not around? Psychological abuse, where the boys would say, like normal things as a kid, like I'm scared of the dark, I'm scared of the closet, I'm scared to go down the basement and get the laundry, whatever. And the parents would then force them to do those things, lock them in the closet until they would stop crying. Hours. That is severe psychological abuse to kids, and it totally messes with your brain. So a lot of people say, well, after the parents were killed, the boys went on a spending spree. They spent $700,000 in a matter of months. That's a crap ton of money now, but in 1989, that was a shitload of money. $700,000. They bought some buildings, like all this crazy stuff. They were going to start a business, like a restaurant, pub kind of thing. And of course they did. They were experiencing freedom and not the daily fear of someone coming into your room and raping you for the first time. And so they went buck wild. And people use that against them. Also had back a little bit of a rap sheet. They had been caught burglarizing in these $1 million homes. They didn't need to go steal stuff. In the movie, the dad takes them and makes them go apologize and pay for these items. I don't know if that part's true, but they did have a few little mishaps, like a lot of like a lot of teenagers have, right? But especially spoiled teenagers. And so yeah, when people are abused, they don't make good choices. This is like, what? I mean, we know this. I mean, it's one of the signs we look for in schools when we see extreme changes in personality, extreme things. We're like, this is not normal. There has to be a reason. And so it's the chicken and the egg. Is it physiological or is it external? It's so hard to know. But it had just brought up so many things for me about abuse, about media. Obviously this was during that same time as like the OJ was happening. There was a couple other high profile court cases. OJ gets off. He gets found not guilty in between the mistrial and the conviction. And so they are hoping that they will get off, but they know, and the Rodney King. So if you don't know the Rodney King story, African-American man was pulled over. I really don't remember. I was a kid, but pulled over for something in LA, and he gets beaten by these officers. And thankfully there was a video of it and many people saw it. And, but the officers are acquitted or get off very light. I don't remember if the final, but basically don't get much. And there were riots, Rodney King riots, if you've ever heard of that. So all that time, there's a lot of unrest. And they say, well, the people need a conviction, right? The populace of people, because two clearly guilty people, Rodney King and the people who O.J. Simpson was clearly guilty, and then the people who beat Rodney King were clearly guilty. And they're like, the people need a conviction, and so plays into that. Like, is that why they were convicted? Anyway, so I wanted to give you that backstory because I do believe that the family, or I know that the family is really trying to either get a mistrial, say that there was procedural errors in the second trial, some issues, some clemency, and get the boys out of, well, they're not boys now, they're grown men. They're in their 40s and 50s now. Well, I guess 50s. They're both older than me. So I think you're going to see, if you have not seen it, go digging in the news and see, make your own decision about what you think truly happened. But it brings up that, what would you do in that situation if you were, many of you listening may have been abused as kids, and what would you do? What is a normal reaction? What would be circumstances for someone to be considered self-defense in long-going abuse? Right? We've seen this before. I remember watching an old movie. It's called The Burning Bed. This lady who was my parents let me watch crazy stuff in the 80s. It was like a Monday night movie called The Burning Bed. And I mean, I was young and I remember this. And I'm watching with my dad Monday nights. My mom would go bowling and we would stay home and watch football or whatever the Monday night movie was. And the woman had physical abuse over many years. And she got tired of it. And she, I think he was on drugs or was drunk one night, so sleeping real hard. Put some gasoline on and burns that shit down. And she gets off on defense. So it wasn't immediate, like I believe back in the day, the level had to be like imminent danger to you or someone that you love or someone, whatever, then it can be considered self-defense. But it brings up that question, like, okay, if you have to kill to get out of a situation, could that be, even if it's not imminent, it's probable that you're going to get hurt again. It's, they continue hurting you. Could that be considered self-defense? In this case, it was not. First one was the mistrial. Second one, convicted, life sentences. So I think they both have some books out. They've been continue to be used by the system. I know a few people have written books and pretended to be friends with them, and then recorded it and published it. And you know how people are. People are just crummy. And take advantage of situations. So anyway, I think that's scarier than Halloween monsters because that's real life monsters. You go into the series thinking that the boys are the monsters, and then at the end you're like, oh, it was the parents. It was the parents that were the monsters and created this horrible situation. 2 lives gone in death, and then 2 more lives ruined, and then all the fallout around them. And really, really sad situations. I'm going to be watching, and I am hoping that they somehow are released. I don't know if the governor can give them clemency, or I don't know how all that works. If they can get a presidential pardon, I don't know if you can get a pardon. Can you get a pardon for murder? I don't know. Or if they could have another trial or find that there was some fault. I don't really know, but man, like I said, if just a little bit of this abuse that they've made the allegations about is true, I think a normal person would see that they should be released. They've served their time and should be released on self-defense and time served. But anyway, hope you've enjoyed learning about some real life monsters today. Have a wonderful, wonderful day, and I will see you soon.